What if achieving fluency in Mandarin Chinese is actually much simpler than you think? That the path to fluency is not some complex series of difficult steps and fancy tools. It's just about focusing on a few core principles that anyone can follow. 我花了10几年的时间来学习这门语言，然后我发现了学好中文的3大要素。只要掌握这些要素，你理解和使用中文的效率会比普通人快几倍。So, let's talk about that first element. So after helping thousands of members learn Chinese through our courses, I've learned that one of the biggest reasons this language becomes so complicated is because learners don't know what to focus on and when to focus on it to make real, satisfying progress towards fluency. Most of us have full-time jobs, right? Families, a ton of other responsibilities. And so we want to make sure that the limited time we have each day to devote to Chinese is being well spent. But we lack the experience and expertise to actually know what to do. It's that classic catch-22 situation of, I don't know what to do because I haven't done it yet. This makes it really hard to focus on anything because you're constantly second-guessing yourself and asking questions. Should I be focusing on listening right now or speaking or reading? I've heard comprehensible input and immersion might work, but do I just watch Chinese TV shows? That's way too hard for me right now. Oh, and I have way too many flashcards for character learning. Should I just balance that out with speaking practice or just keep learning more characters? Okay, how do I practice speaking then? Just find a tutor and chat? Okay, this tutor's making me use a textbook. It's kind of boring, but she's nice, so I guess I'll keep paying her and going for a while longer. Should I learn words from a frequency list, or should I just learn these words from the phrase book that I picked up or from this course that I bought? Or should I just use this listen and repeat program? These constant questions stress us out and create decision fatigue, and that drains our energy, it wears us down, and eventually we kind of just want to quit altogether, or at least have a very long break from learning Chinese. So what we need first and foremost is a key foundational element. We need structure. And great structure is really just great strategy, which means learning the right words at the right time to get to fluency relatively fast. Now, there are over 100,000 words in modern Chinese, but really you only need to master a couple of thousand common words to be able to have basic conversations. Double that to 4,000 or 5,000 words, and you'll be able to speak with a pretty impressive level of fluency. 10,000 common words is more than the vast majority of native speakers ever really use or even hear day to day. So in terms of structure, the simplest approach is to focus on learning the most common couple of thousand words first. And you could learn those words without even learning Chinese characters as well, and I'll get to how very shortly. And if you don't care about getting to a high level of Chinese, you just want to have basic conversations and that's the highest level you ever want to reach, then you probably don't even need to worry about learning characters too much at all. But if you do want to get to an intermediate or above level of fluency, then definitely want to learn characters because it makes learning words in the long term much clearer and easier and just generally makes the language much more straightforward. Now, just like with words, characters are unevenly distributed. Even just learning the most common 1,000 characters will get you to 90% coverage of the entire language, meaning look at 1,000 characters in a text and you'll be able to recognize 900 of them on average. In fact, I looked this up and learning the most common 1,600 characters using our course will unlock 5,000 common words, which is more than enough for B2 or intermediate level fluency. Now, if you're serious about Chinese and you want to get to the point where you're understanding TV shows and movies or even novels, and you're having deep conversations with Chinese speaking people, your eventual aim should be to learn the most common 3,000 characters and 10,000 words, of course, which will constitute over 99% of the entire language by frequency. And you can get these from a frequency list online, and that's fine, although you'll need 2 separate lists probably, one for characters and another for words because they won't be in sync with each other. So it'll kind of turn into 2 separate projects. And plus, you can't just learn words from a list. You actually have to see them and hear them in context of sentences to be able to practice with them in context, and so that you'll actually be able to learn how to use them and understand the grammar of them. And really, you'd have to find a big list of example sentences too. So that's now 3 major projects. And then later on, longer form content to practice listening and reading and speaking with would also be very useful. So This is all totally doable if you're highly disciplined and resourceful, and way better than the conventional approach, but it's still quite a long and kind of boring slog. So click below to join our course for free, and you can follow a single order of common characters that unlock common words, and you'll see everything in context of sentences that are completely understandable because they're made up of characters and words you've already learned up until that point. So you'll be getting that really nice comprehensible input really early on. You have to figure out everything all on your own. So learn the first few hundred characters and words for free, link in the description. And if you like it, you can upgrade to continue all the way to over 3,000 characters and just under 1,200 words. So that's it. That's the structure. If you start off by learning a few hundred common characters and a couple of thousand common words from a list of some kind, so that you have that foundation to be able to understand sentences and understand how to use the words in context. Then, as you continue to learn characters, you'll be able to learn new words directly from sentences or Chinese content. And you use this growing momentum to expand your vocabulary over time. And the more words and the more characters you learn, the faster and easier you'll be able to learn new words, because the language will just become clearer and easier as your foundation and general skill level grows. But the battle is far from over, right? The next piece of the puzzle is actually how to learn, retain, and use the words you need in the most simple and effective way possible. And this part is probably what causes the biggest headache for learners overall. There's so many approaches, tools, techniques to choose from, right? So let's start with the big picture when it comes down to methodology, how to learn words. To keep things simple, you want to try to learn holistically wherever possible. Try to avoid learning things too top down or too bottom up. So too top down, for example, would be rote memorization, which is basically trying to force information into your brain through sheer repetition without a foundational understanding of it. For example, just parroting a big list of common phrases over and over again, or trying to learn words from a word list, but without ever learning their characters, or even fully understanding the basics of pinyin and pronunciation, right? So you also want to avoid going too bottom up. That's also bad. So just learning a bunch of character components without learning characters, or learning a bunch of characters without seeing them in context of words, or learning a bunch of words from a word list without seeing them in context of sentences. So if you do this, it's like building a brickyard and no house, which is useless. Whereas top-down learning is just like having a rubbish house that could collapse at any moment, right? So this video is all about keeping things simple. And technically speaking, just repeating information is about as simple as it gets on the surface. But actually, it becomes more and more complicated later on because you'll be constantly forgetting everything. Long term, the simplest and easiest path is to learn characters and words bottom up, but to see them in context top down as soon as possible. Or vice versa. Learn useful phrases and sentences, but also be working on the characters and words so you'll eventually learn them, and make sure you do that as soon as possible. Now, let's go a bit deeper and dive into the best proven methods and tools that make learning Chinese words as simple as possible. So first, you want to use memory palaces to learn Chinese characters, specifically a system that we call the Hanzibu method. This technique involves associating each element of a Chinese character with a location in a familiar place, like buildings you know well. By creating these vivid, memorable scenes in these locations, you can recall characters with ridiculous accuracy and you can learn them really fast. I'm not going to explain this method here because there are multiple in-depth guides on my channel, and also you will learn this method step by step by joining our free course and community, link in the description. But I'll just say that you can use this method to learn everything you need to know about any Chinese character in seconds once you get good at it. It works for anyone as well. Now, the second game-changing method is mnemonic associations for learning vocabulary. So by connecting new Chinese words to other similar sounding words you know, you rapidly create strong neural pathways that make recall super easy and super fast. So for example, the word 飞机 means plane. So you might imagine a plane flying over Mount Fiji. Kind of sounds like 飞机, right? Something like that. This allows you to learn 100 or more words in a single session if you want. Next is extensive reading and listening. So seeing and hearing the words in context that you understand. Do lots and lots of reading and lots of listening, and you'll naturally get a good sense of grammar over time. All right. Oh, and don't just consume anything. I'm not just saying don't put on random podcasts or read random books, especially if you aren't yet advanced. That's very inefficient. Remember the mass sentences that I mentioned earlier? Just focus on those for now. Review them as spaced repetition sentence flashcards if you like, or at least just read them from a Google sheet many, many times and listen to them as audio files as many, many times, as much as possible each day. Spaced repetition software is also a game changer in terms of making reviewing and retaining everything simple. It basically just organizes what you need to review each day and saving you a ton of time and energy in thinking about that. So learning Chinese characters using memory palaces, learning words using mnemonics, reviewing them in context of sentences, and practicing with audio files, all of this will rapidly build up your passive vocabulary and maybe a little bit of active vocabulary too. But in order to use the words fluently, you'll need to really build up that active vocabulary. And this is a totally separate skill. Now, you might think, okay, so I'll just find a native speaking tutor and practice speaking. Well, no, that's not the simplest way to do it. In fact, that gets really complicated really fast. It also gets expensive. You have to arrange meetings, you have to turn up to those meetings, and you have to find a tutor that you like. And also in these sessions that you have, even if they're good tutors, you'll often fall into bad habits of not really using new vocabulary, just sort of use vocabulary that you're comfortable with. So you won't be activating new vocabulary, you'll just be rehashing old vocabulary all the time. So the best solution that we've found is to treat learning to speak kind of like learning an instrument. So you don't rely on doing piano recitals to get good at piano, right? That's putting the cart before the horse. You get good at piano by practicing over and over again at home by yourself in your own time. And then the recital is like a benchmark. It's like a proof of your effectiveness of your practice, right? So to keep this as simple as possible, we're not going to rely on native speakers as our primary way of activating vocabulary and getting better at speaking. We're going to focus on proven practice exercises and just do them daily. So here are the best ones that I've found. First up is the tried and true method of listening and repeating, right? Repeat your sentence audio aloud. And once you get better, you become more familiar with your materials at least, you can upgrade that to shadowing, which is basically speaking with the audio about at the same time as if you're kind of singing along to a song. And this will improve your pronunciation and your rhythm. Next up is the most challenging and also most rewarding in terms of the massive results you're going to get for your efforts. I'm talking about retrieval practice. This can be done in several ways, but basically it's the process of trying to speak Chinese, taking a thought in your native language or a feeling that you have and trying to say it in Chinese. Now, if you've been practicing a lot with your sentences, reading them, listening to them, and repeating them every day, and you can do that quite well, then you can start trying to produce them as well. So just read the English or whatever your native language is and try to say the Chinese version of that sentence and then correct yourself based on the audio or your translation on the back of the card. That's your feedback. It's going to be challenging, but it will make you better at speaking very quickly. Now, the good news is this form of retrieval practice or active recall or free recall, if you like, gives you a great gift. You see, we all have to go through that process of sucking at speaking. You have to just not be very good at speaking before you get good at it, right? But you no longer have to put yourself in these awkward or embarrassing speaking situations and try to say stuff and fail as your only form of language activation. You can now make the vast majority of your mistakes and failures, which are inevitable, in private, in your practice time. Now, there are some other methods and techniques that you can use to spice up your study, of course. One thing that I haven't spoken about so far is immersion in native content. Now, once you have a few thousand words under your belt, 1,000 or so characters maybe, you'll be able to dive into real Chinese content, and you should do that gradually more and more as your vocabulary grows, right? Just make sure that when you are immersing, it's active as much as possible. You're trying to actively focus and you're trying to learn new words from the content. What makes this really easy is tools like Megaku or LingoPie for creating flashcards from TV content on Netflix or YouTube. It might not be the most efficient way to grow your vocabulary, but it sure is fun and it's effective and it will spice up your study. And also, yes, you should connect with native speakers every now and again, right? You don't need to do it every day for sure, or even every week. And again, you don't need to rely on it, right? But you could book, say, a slot with a native speaker once a month or twice a month just to benchmark your progress and have some meaningful interaction in the language. That's going to be really useful, especially if you don't live in China. So you can try also speaking to yourself for like 1 or 2 minute bursts multiple times throughout your day. You could also try uploading your sentences that you're practicing with to an AI chatbot like ChatGPT and have AI ask you questions related to them. You can try all these methodologies and they are fun, they are effective, but if you just want to keep it as simple as possible, you can stick with the first few techniques and tools that we mentioned earlier on, and those are more than enough to get to a very good level of Chinese. But if and only if you apply this third and most crucial element. And without this, structure and methodology are useless. So around the same time I started Mandarin Blueprint, after I passed the HSK in like 25% of the average time, I had huge breakthroughs in the language. I felt awesome about myself and I was learning more about how to get better at Chinese fast. But very quickly, around this time, I entered a several-year period of barely doing anything in the language. In fact, I kind of got worse over those few years at Chinese. And the simple reason was that my habits and mindset were not strong enough to deal with the various life changes I was going through. And I was unable to stay consistent while juggling work and family, kids. So I knew the best structure, right? I even created the best structure with my business partner, Phil, right? For our customers. I knew some of the best methods in the world for learning languages. I knew what to do. I just wasn't doing it. So really, consistency is the third and most crucial element of all. It's the glue that holds everything else together, because you could have methods and structure that kind of suck, but if you're consistent, you could get to a very high level in the language. Now, consistency and building and maintaining habits is very complicated on the surface. There are so many things you could do. There's so many videos you can watch, courses you can take, books you can read about habits and motivation. So what I'm going to do right now is just simplify this for you and give you the most important principles to stay consistent with your Chinese study. So just make sure that you think about these few things. First off, think about why you want to learn this language to a high level. You want at least one strong reason, and imagine using fluent Chinese in that way that you want, and use that as your motivation to keep going when the going gets tough. Write down what you want to actually be able to do specifically, like specific experiences you want to have. For example, if you're learning Chinese to connect with your wife or children or in-laws, just write down a scenario of you having an amazing conversation with them. Now, if you're learning Chinese to prove to yourself you can do something amazing to level up your self-image, maybe your societal status or whatever, then envision yourself reading a Chinese novel or having a deep conversation in Mandarin a couple of years from now. And then, and this is key, think about the negative consequences of not acting, of not staying consistent, and therefore not achieving your dream that you want. Feeling dumb, for example, when speaking to your in-laws, or looking back in your life when you're old and regretting not achieving what you wanted to, right? Think about that too. And then set aside some time each morning, use a calendar, block it out in your calendar or set an alarm, and then sit down at that time and set a timer if you need to of 15, 30 or 45 minutes and make some progress towards your goal. Do that every day. Mornings work best for the vast majority of people, so get up earlier if you have to. Create your materials as well in advance, so your flashcards, your audio files, and have them with you at all times on your phone or your other devices to lower the friction to starting. I'm super busy, so I have my audio files ready to play in VLC player on my phone so I can listen to them and shadow them and squeeze in those minutes throughout the day. VLC is really good, by the way, for audio files because it's free and it has a great option for adjusting the playback speed. You also want to focus on small incremental improvements. Do not put too much pressure on yourself. Start with just 15 or 30 minutes per day the first week and then increase from there. 30 minutes per day consistently is way better than 2 hours twice a week. You want to aim for no 0 days. Even if it's just 1 minute of listening before you pass out at the end of a very busy day. Continuous actions taken daily will reinforce your identity as a Chinese learner. And once you take on this new identity, it will eventually make it very difficult not to do the work. So finally, join our course for free and our community to make the process way more straightforward and get that massively improved structure, methodology, and consistency through accountability with fellow learners surrounding you all the time. All right, so that's the trifecta: structure, learning the right words at the right time; methodology, learning in the right way; and consistently actually taking action every day. So if you have these 3 elements dialed in, Chinese fluency becomes real simple. But there are still a lot of pitfalls that you could fall into going on this journey to fluent Chinese, right? Even with this framework I just gave you. And so check out this video next, where I break down why most Chinese learners fail and how to succeed.